All right, folks. Well, we've done away with the system that failed us last week here on Beyond the Booth. We had an internet issue, and every time we had internet issues, it's going to knock us out. We went to our virtual studio, and I think we've got Phil Harris online. And let's see if we can bring Phil. Are you there with us, buddy?
I'm here, ready, willing, and able.
Well, everybody will work on a little sound right now, so you're going to have to be a little patient with us. First time recording this way now. Phil, if we get lucky tonight, we're going to get Justin and Heath on at 6:30. Now, Heath had a ball game with his kids, so we decided to delay them till 6:30 to 7. But we got plenty to talk about until 6:30, as you called the Jackson County tournament this week.
Yeah, it was once again an outstanding tournament. We had two great final games, especially in the girls. The boys game kind of was a runaway in the second half as Skyline pulled away to beat Pisgah. But overall, we had some great games in the tournament. Of course, Howie, Cheney, and I had to pull double duty. We had four semifinal games during the early part of the day and then two final games at night. So six radio broadcasts of high school basketball games. It was grueling. It was tough. But of course, I think he and I feel the same way. It was hard, but we do it again tomorrow.
Phil, um, we started out doing high school basketball. That tournament, the DeKalb County tournament, that's where you and I both cut our yard. And you've always loved high school basketball. What is it you enjoy about calling those games in the
I,
DeKalb County, Jackson County
well,
tournament?
well, for one thing, you can build a lot more relationships. You're around a lot more people. Uh, you get to talk to a lot more coaches and that type of thing. But the thing is, I like broadcasting about basketball is it's so fast, it's so furious. You just kind of describe what's going on in front of you, and I like the challenge. It challenges you mentally, and but I think it's where you really cut your teeth in broadcasting because if you can broadcast a basketball game, you can broadcast anything.
Well, I don't do basketball now. I've played with it a little bit, but there's a good point to that. If you can do a basketball game, football's easy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just great practice for your mind. Now, football, you have to kind of slow it down a little bit, maybe describe a little bit more and add a little detail and things like with basketball, you just tell what's going on in front of you.
So, Phil, I think Skyline won both of the boys and girls tournament. Are they truly that much better? I heard you talk about their girls being pretty good.
Yeah. Well, of course, Pisgah's in 2A. They beat Pisgah in the final. Skyline is 1A. Very good girls basketball team. There is no doubt about it. They are very solid. I think they went undefeated in their area. I think they went 8-0. But Coach McGill, Craig McGill, coaches both the boys and girls, and Skyline, has an excellent point guard, Kenya King. She was the MVP of the tournament. Uh, Not a very big young lady, but she can really knife her way to the basket, makes things happen. And they've got Blake Stuckey, who can shoot, who can play inside and outside. A very solid 1A basketball team. And the thing is with them, they have so much interest in basketball at Skyline. It's like the kids are born to play basketball when you go to school at Skyline.
That's true. And, I think a little of that existed at DAR before they started football. I remember we used to go back there in the 90s. It just seemed like everything was basketball, basketball. Sometimes when a small school starts football, it can distract from the basketball program.
Yeah, it can in a lot of areas. Because most of the kids, if they're going to play basketball, they're there at Skyline to play basketball. They had football for a while, but they never had a stadium. Woodville started football about the same time. Well, they've got a stadium now. Skyline was having to play their games in other places, and football just never took a stronghold. But it's always been such a strong basketball community.
So let me ask you about Pisgah, multiple time state champion, and you said they lost to Skyline, but what's their girls team look like this year?
Well, they're pretty solid. I think their girls team and boys team both got off to kind of a late start. And of course, Pisgah has been a perennial playoff in high school basketball for a long time. Of course, the final of this game, Skyline won 48-45. So it was close all the way up until the end. But this Pisgah football team, basketball team, girls is very solid. Piper Anderson, she's a good 3-point shooter. She didn't hit many threes in the final game, but she hit several in the semifinals. Of course, Campbell Barron, she's an outstanding guard. She can penetrate and makes things happen. A very good athlete, a fierce defender. And incidentally, in the semifinal game, she went over 1,000 points for her career. So hats off to that young lady.
That's
But,
accomplishment.
but the thing, this Pisgah team, you can't count them out come playoff time. I know Ider won their area and they'll host the area tournament. But, at this time of year, Coach Kerry Ellison, who's been at Pisgah for a long time, his teams seem to step up their level of play. And they played very well in the tournament. I think they kind of ran out of gas, though, in the finals.
Before we flip over to boys, one more questions about girls. You did 6 games. Were they one of those semifinal teams that lost that can make a run in the state tournament that you saw?
Well, yes, North Sand Mountain's girls are not bad. I think they are like 13-10 on the year or something like that. They're very solid. On the boys' side, and what's crazy is Pisgah, North Sand Mountain, both are ranked in the top 10, and both are just barely over 500 on the boys' side. But on that girls' side, it's so competitive in that area. Ider's pretty good. North Sand Mountain's pretty good. Pisgah's pretty good in that area, and you can't count Section out. They're not a bad basketball team either. So these teams will be, they'll make a run at it. You're liable to see a couple of them down at Jacksonville in the Northeast Region tournament.
Bill, we've often talked about how much football success can affect basketball. Is there any of the late run of the football team? Are there any of those kids that went straight from football to basketball?
Oh yeah, on the boys' side, that's definitely where it was. Their football team is basically the basketball team, so they got off. They got a late start, but they played very well in the tournament, and I think they may be. Coach Blaine Smith is their coach. They may be coming together at the right time. And these names are ones you hear on the football field, like Brody Overdeer, Mason Holcomb, Jacob Kirby, Legion McCrary, Luke Gilbert. All these guys played football, so they were even Jet Jeffrey. They were late getting started on the basketball floor, but played well in the tournament. And in the second half against Skyline's boys are solid. They've got one of the better teams they've had in a while. I think they've got a great point guard in Bryant Kennemer. Pisgah could not stop him in the second half. But this Pisgah basketball team, if they, shoot well, they're very physical and they like to attack the basket. And if they can make shots, they're a dangerous team.
Going back to that small school basketball, a friend of the show, Michael Schmidt, who you called a game with up in South Pittsburgh and Squatchy one night. Michael was an all-state football player who also played basketball, and he tells a great story about what it's like to be a football basketball player at a small school. Friday night, he plays in the semifinals, quarterfinals at Gatlinburg Pittman. Gets up Saturday morning, gets on the bus, and goes over to City and plays City in basketball. There's not much more you can do as an athlete than play Gatlinburg Pittman, then turn around and play City in basketball.
Oh no, yeah, that's Iron Man right there, and guarantee you. Of course, now they've kind of got it worked out where you really don't start basketball, until football's over with, and if they do, the football players don't join the basketball team. But in Pisgah's case, they had to wait for football to finish because that was the nucleus of the team.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any choice. So, and as a matter of fact, I want to say Pisgah's girls played like 6 games last week. I mean, they just had to, because they had to rush this tournament in. So, for Pisgah boys and girls, they were fatigued come Saturday. But, I was surprised at the effort they gave because you couldn't tell it they had played as many games as they had during the week. But they wanted to get that tournament in. I think the Jackson County tournament is now 55 years, and they have never had to cancel a tournament, and they didn't want to begin to do that this year. So they wanted to get it in. And so they were able to. Woodville put on, they were a great host for the tournament, and me and Howie enjoyed ourselves. We didn't get a whole lot of time to really talk to a lot of people, but we enjoyed the basketball there because there was some great basketball all during that day.
And shout out to you and Howie, 6 basketball games in one day. By the time you got to the sixth one, did you feel like your voice was just going to go out?
No, not really there. It's just mentally, he and I both felt the same. We were like zombies. We were just zapped. We did the first 4 games, and we was glad to get the break. And of course, they had the JV girls and boys games. Of course, Pisgah won both of those, both the girls and boys JV tournament finals. We got to go eat, but when we got back, both of us was just kind of zapped. So we just had to get a second gear and get those last 2 games in. But the games were very competitive, which made it easy for us. So it was still thrilling for us. Anytime you get to do something you love, it's not work. It just kind of wears you down eventually.
Well, let's jump over to that boys' side. You talk about Skyline, the boys' team being better, and it has been in a few years. What was that competition like for Skyline leading up to that?
Well, and they were the number 1 seed in the tournament. Now, North Sand Mountain gave them a great game in the semifinals. They beat North Sand early part of the day, 69-64. So it was not easy for Skyline. But then in the finals, uh, Skyline led only 29-26 at the half. But what was good about Coach Craig McGill's team, they stuck with their game plan. Pisgah, wanted to play an up tempo. Skyline's more of a half court type team, and Bryant Kemp is an outstanding point guard. He gets the basketball. You're not going to take it away from him. He's not going to turn the basketball over. He makes things happen. He draws the defense to him, which gives open looks for the other guys on the court. So having an outstanding point guard makes a real difference if you're a half court team. And Coach McGill stayed with that game plan the whole way. Pisgah kind of played in spurts. They were real good, and then they would miss a lot of shots. So Skyline was just kind of steady the whole way, and that's the end of the reason they won the championship is they won 70-49. Pisgah won they had to play in the quarterfinals. They beat North Jackson 71-48, and then they wore down Woodville in the second half. And that was in the early part of the days. They beat Woodville 67-47. But I think they kind of run out of gas in the second half. Could not knock down could not knock down shots late. But Luke Gilbert put together 2 great basketball games. I know he scored 14 in the finals, and we talked about Bryant Kennemer for Skyline. He scored 16. Also, Zaire Golden chipped in another 16. Of course, Bryant Kennemer was the MVP of the tournament.
Did they have to play 3 times in one
Well,
day, or
no, Pisgah played on Wednesday. They had ball games. They still had games, and some teams had area games
yeah?
during the week. So they played on Wednesday the quarterfinals, and then all the semifinals and finals were played on Saturday.
That's
Uh, so Pisgah played on Wednesday. Skyline had a bye because they were the top seed
mm-hmm.
in the tournament. There's 6 teams in the county. 2 teams got byes, and Pisgah had to play and won, and then they beat Woodville in the semifinal. Wow. Skyline beat North Sand Mountain, and that was a great game at 69-64. So they just both had to play 2 games during the day. But, it's still grueling. That's kind of like summertime basketball.
I think about Georgia playing 2 when the tornado hit the Georgia Dome. And they had to play 2 in that first night it opened, and went on to win the tournament. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that was special.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, of course, I think what happens to you in those kind of games, as long as you're close or you're leading, your legs don't go away. But then when you start getting behind, that mental fatigue starts taking over, and then it takes its toll physically.
You've got to see part of the Cobb County tournament and Jackson County both. Um, what did you leave with the impression? Are they a sizable difference between DeKalb County, Jackson County? Is Jackson County better? Is DeKalb County better?
In a lot of ways, they're even now. I'm going to tell you something. On the girls' side, Plainview is very good. I mean, they are head and shoulders above everybody else as far as if you compare both counties. But in Class 1A, the Skyline girls are very good. Of course, you got to look at it this way too. Plainview's 3A. So there's a big difference there. On the boys' side, Plainview and Geraldine, very good. Those two are going to make runs in the playoffs, and I won't be surprised if those two don't play each other in the region final down at Jacksonville State. And of course, on the boys' side, Skyline's boys, very good. Pisgah's one of those teams, they're kind of hot and cold, but they could get hot at the right time. North Sun Mountain's well coached. We know how good they are year in, year out in boys basketball. Uh, and I don't think there's any clear cut favorite in 2A in boys. So there's a team, if they get hot, they can make a run because Pisgah and North Sun Mountain's ranked in the top 10, and neither one has impressive records. It's just that in the past, they have been so successful on the court.
Right. Right. Do you you and Howie done those 6 games? You talked a little bit about the individual players. What was it like with Woodville holding that? That had to be a big burden. Had to be a lot of behind the scenes work from Woodville to pull that off in one day.
Oh yeah, of course it takes it takes a community and a lot of support from the school and your administrative folks, your teachers and faculty, and of course the volunteers that take care of the hospitality room. They had a spread of food. We just got to go visit it one time, but Howie and I filled up on chicken and dumplings, and I think that got us through the night. Uh, so they put on a great show, and every school does it. It's a big responsibility. Sylvania was the host for the county tournament in DeKalb County, and we ended up to try to get that thing in because of the snow. They had games at 2 different schools. They had them at the DeKalb County Schools Coliseum, and then also had games at Sylvania. So you had 4 games. You had 8 games going on at 2 different sites for one night during the tournament. So that was all the quarterfinal games. So it's an event, and the schools are the host, and they make a lot of money off of it. But still, it is hard work, and you have to have a lot of people to step up.
Would it be a shocker to you if you were driving down the road and you heard you got chicken and dumplings in Woodville, Alabama, in a hospitality room?
Hey, that's not bad. Most time it's pizza or something like that. But they had all kind of cooked stuff. I didn't pay attention to the rest of the stuff. I got hooked on them chicken and dumplings, and I didn't go much of anywhere else.
I remember we had Zaxby's up in Rockwood, Tennessee, at the playoff games, and I love Zaxby's. So I was actually eating and broadcasting at the same time. Phil, can you imagine me doing that?
Oh no, no, not you.
No.
No. I did, but it was a lot of fun, and the people there was great. We had several interviews. Even Jason Bowen of the Jackson County Sentinel was there. We interviewed him, and talked about the Tyler Vann hire, which we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we talked about Dwayne Patterson, who was inducted into the Jackson County Hall of Fame, going to be inducted to the Cobb County Hall of Fame, and talked about a little bit about his story, how Jason got started into riding. And the thing is, you would think about somebody like him, as good as he is, he could go somewhere else, but he's in a hotbed because Jackson County, DeKalb County has such great following and great sports. They're always playing, for state titles. And it doesn't matter what sport, if it's volleyball, if it's softball, if it's basketball, if it's football. We have a lot of successful teams around here. So Jason has a full-time job just trying to keep up with our local teams here.
Being a small town sports writer is not a bad gig.
No, no, no. And he loves it. I mean, he enjoys every bit of it. And that's what I asked him, if he had ever go anywhere else. He said, well, a lot of times if I did do that, by the second round, I'd be done. He said, I know a lot of guys that they go for a couple of games and they're finished. He goes, shoot, I'm having to go all the way to Montgomery to cover 3 teams in the finals. He said that was just what makes it worthwhile, and it gives him a lot of history, and he enjoys coming up with all the background information and digging, and making it interesting for the fans. And that's what I always talk about when people do. And we're going to be talking to Justin Thrasher and Heath Lokey, and they do a great job of doing a little research and telling you a little bit about, what's going to be going on in the night of the football game. And that's where you engage the fans and you keep them interested, is when you add a little information that makes it more than just a football game.
Well, let me just go ahead and uh, bring in. I think I've got them both here. Heath, Justin, are you here with us yet? Let me see if I can add them to the stream. Heath, Justin, have we got you aboard now?
Hey guys.
Hey, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can. We tried this last week. Of course, we got Justin Thrasher and Heath Lokey from the Scottsboro broadcast team. We tried this last week, ran into internet trouble. But Phil, before we go to Justin and Heath and get their comments, we wanted to have this show to talk about the Tyler Vann hour. Very early on, you texted me and you said, if I was Scottsboro, here's a list of the coaches I think I'd look at. Tyler Vann was on that list.
Yeah, I think he would, would have been the first one I would look at, knowing, this area. So I thought he would be a logical one to look at first. Of course, I don't know what their thinking is, but he's an outstanding young coach, got a lot of years ahead of him, and he's worth putting an investment into.
Justin, as the play-by-play guy for Scottsboro, what was your initial thoughts when you heard Tyler Vann?
Well, I'll tell you, Randall, when the news broke that Cris Bell was resigning as Scottsboro's head coach, Heath will tell you, I called him immediately as soon as I found out. And the first person that I mentioned as a possible replacement was Tyler Vann, because from a distance, I mean, Coach Vann he's had success everywhere he's been. I mean, we'll get into it here in a few minutes as far as what he's done, but you want to talk about one of the best up-and-coming young coaches in the state of Alabama at 28 years old. He's the second youngest coach in Scottsboro football history. I mean, he's definitely one of the best ones in the state, and especially, to be under 30 years old and already, in North Alabama, just kind of in our backyard. I think it was an absolute home run hire by Scottsboro.
I think so too. And of course, I've spent the last 3 years with Coach Vann on the Tyler Vann show. He nothing but class, has treated me great. Heath, before I turn it over to Phil to ask y'all some questions, when Coach Bell stepped away, he didn't leave that cupboard empty at Scottsboro. There's something to build on there.
Absolutely. You start looking at an offensive side of the ball. You're returning a quarterback that's entering his third year as a starter. We got to see him start a little bit in his freshman year with some injuries. But, a kid that's accounted for, nearly 1,500 yards of offense last year, throwing the ball and running the ball in the offense that Coach Bell ran with a triple option. Didn't get to throw the ball a ton, but still showed some promise there and some improvement. Over 20 touchdowns. And I think, Jake has really grown into that quarterback position over the last few years. He's become a leader. He's tough. He's physical. He's mentally tough. And I think one of the things that's probably helped him in that triple option offense is the ability to make decisions and to make decisions quickly. Of course, every play there was at least one read, but more than likely there was two reads that he had to make, and of course, and he was checking at the line too. So a ton of experience there coming back at quarterback. You've got a running back in Jacoby Edmondson that last year didn't even start. At the beginning of the season, Keelan Alvarez was there. Jacoby was a 1,200-yard rusher last year. He averaged almost 9 yards a carry at that fullback position. So I expect him to have a heavy workload for Coach Vann. And then offensive line, you've got at least three starters returning that from last year's offensive line. Probably the biggest hole moving into next season for Coach Vann that he's going to have to work out is the wide receiver position. We graduated both of our starting wide receivers. Now, granted, they blocked way more than they caught, and they were really good at blocking. But he's going to inherit a pretty decent returning class between our seniors and our juniors that'll be coming back. And then there's some freshmen and sophomores that played as well that scored a lot even for us last year. So offensively, there's a ton coming back. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we really graduated a lot of our secondary talent. Both of our safeties are gone, but some young kids got some look at corner. And we've got, Drew Smith graduated. He was probably our best linebacker last year, but we're getting a couple kids back that were injured early on at the linebacker position, like Griffin Murdoch, and then you're going to have J.C. Heikkinen Defensive line returning some kids too that had a lot of playing time last year. So um, Coach Bell did not leave the cupboard bare there. And special teams wise, let me just say this: Cole Rock, our kicker, I believe he's going into his junior year. The kid just got better and better. He made a couple 40-something, 45-yard field goals last year. So he's got an opportunity to move into this region next year and, with some players and can make some noise early on in his Scottsboro career.
Phil, why don't you take another round of take a round of questions with Justin and
Well,
he.
well, guys, either one of you can answer this. Of course, I mean, y'all know as well as I do, you're going to totally see a different offense. You're not going to see the veer. You're not going to see the option. But Coach Vann's still going to run the football. But one thing he's great at is developing quarterbacks, and he'll find the skill people because he's going to throw the ball when he wants to, but everything's going to be set up by the run. And he's also known for defense. And of course, the one thing I know about Coach Vann, he's such a competitor. Now he'll work those kids' tail off, but they'll respond because they'll run through walls for him.
Yeah. So the thing about Coach Vann that I really appreciate and admire is his willingness to adapt his offense to his personnel. I mean, in my research on Coach Vann, you start whenever he was hired at Woodville back in 2020 during the COVID year. I mean, they set a school record for points that year at Woodville, 276 points that year, 5 wins, which, I mean, that's the first time in school history when he was hired there that they had a winning record in their region. Now, they've only been playing football since 2006, so in the 14 years, that was the only time they'd ever had a winning region record. If you go back and look year over year at Sylvania in his 3 years there, they scored more points every single season that he was there. In fact, last year, Heath, I believe, Aiden Parham, I think he cracked 2,000 yards on the ground for him.
Right. Yeah, I think he went over 2,500 or close to it. And to your point, Justin, the previous year, 21, or excuse me, 22, I guess, looking from a distance, just watching stats, he had a really good quarterback that year, and they threw the ball a ton. And then this past year, I know they threw the ball quite a bit, but it was all centered around, to your point too, Phil, on Aiden Parham and the ability to run the football and a good offensive line up front. And I think that's one of the things that excites us the most, and the community too, is that, listen, I'm not trying to talk bad about Coach Bell at all. Coach Bell did a great job with Crappy. He's been to the playoff 2 years in a row, hosted one second round last year. I think people are excited to see a different style of offense from what we've seen over the past few years.
Yeah, well, Heath, I think, Coach Bell, and he did discipline. That team was prepared to play. A lot of good pluses. But then when you get into the, playoff picture, when you play against athletic teams and y'all understand this, when you're running the veer, it's very tough. You have to find mismatches, and that's what Tyler Vann's good at. He'll adapt. Of course, they had a great offensive line. Those 5 guys looked alike when you stood and watched them. And also, they're going to be solid on the defensive side of the ball. But the one thing Tyler Vann does have, and Coach Bell did, is those kids know how to win. And when you start with that and you don't have to teach them how to win, they already know that. They already have the expectations of winning. It'll make his job a little bit easier. He's just got to change around the moving parts just a little bit.
Well, Phil, one thing that Coach Vann talks about is setting the culture in the weight room. And he's made comments. He told us, we had the privilege of sitting down with him last week and having lunch with him, and he talked to us a little bit about, you're not always going to be the most athletic team in the playoffs. Especially when you start seeing some of these teams, from Birmingham or South from us. But what you can be is more physical and tougher. And he talks about, every day just kind of going to war with the iron, so to speak, I guess. I mean, he's that's where it really starts for him. That's where one thing that I'm a fan of his from a distance, not because necessarily his success on the football field, it's because of his process. And one thing I've learned over the years in leadership classes and everything, that's really what successful people do well, is they build a process, they refine that process, they're constantly working on building and refining their own process for things. And I think that's the reason that Coach Vann has had so much success everywhere he's been so far is because he's got a successful process.
Yeah, I think you're right. And a lot of things he does too is that competitiveness, even in practice. He'll challenge his kids to compete against each other, even in practice, and then that carries over to the football field. And and that's one of the things that people don't really pay that much attention to. But if they're running sprints, you've got guys elbowing each other trying to win, and that's the kind of things he teaches. And those kids, he's going to work them hard, but they're going to love him for it because they're going to see results. Because he's going to be the first one to get in their face, but he'll also be the first one to pat them on the back.
Well, that's the kind of coach that I want to play for, and I always look for that as a coach that can get on to you, but at the end of the day, you can go back to, you've got a relationship with them. You've earned the right to get on to the kid in a way that may seem tough, from the outside, but at the end of the day, they'll run through a brick wall for you because they know that coach has got their back. And that to me is something that I think up the road that Coach Benefield has. When you go watch those kids, I mean, he gets on them hard. But those kids they'll do anything they got to do because that, to your point, Phil, that's what they do in practice. That's the culture that they built from Pee Wee up to varsity. They expect to win, and they know that what it's going to take to do that. And the weight room is going to be really important. Coach Bell's offense, especially on the offensive line side, for instance. If you go back to Georgia Tech and like Paul Johnson, those offensive linemen are 260 playing D1. As opposed to everybody else at 300. Well, because they got to get upfield a little bit more and be able to move a little bit more off the reads and the veer and the things that they want to do. Well, that's going to look different. I think we're going to bulk up a little bit. And our offensive lineman, like Tegan Harris, for instance, just a sophomore, that kid's got a fire in him. Well, where we've seen him Justin block opponents into the track off the field multiple times. He's a kid that might get you a little bit of a personal foul every once in a while, but you can live with it because it's a hustle personal foul. He's playing until the end of the whistle. Not that he runs his mouth, it's just that he plays hard. But he's doing that at like 6'2", 240 right now. He's got a ton of room to add weight. Colin Rogers, Lawson Talent, they all have room to add weight. And I expect us to be able to, on the offensive line side, really grow. Coach Williams, who was here, he did a great job with them. And I think other coaches around the region that I talked to, some of them from like Douglas, for instance, I talked to some of those guys I grew up with, and they would talk about how we probably had the best offensive line in the region last year. Well, I think they'll take a step forward and get even better in this with the type of competitiveness in the weight room and on the practice field that Coach Vann's going to bring. And Justin, we know that Coach Vann's definitely competitive. But as we started talking to him, it came out, Justin and I just happen to be Auburn fans, so we're sucker for punishment. And it was right after or right before that basketball game in Tuscaloosa this weekend or past week, and he gave us a day, and then he started rubbing it in a little bit where how we had to take the loss there and stuff. So it was fun going back and forth with him a little bit on that already. But I like that kind of stuff. That makes it fun for everybody, and that competitive edge is important. And not saying that Coach Bell didn't have that by any stretch, but Coach Vann being from Northeast Alabama, he's been to Scottsboro before, I believe. Was it 2016 maybe? One of the years with Coach Jacobs. He knows the area. He knows the landscape. He knows the kids that are going to come through here. He knows how the workings of Scottsboro, the inner workings of how everything is. And he's going to be able to bring in some of his own coaches. And of course, we've got some good coaches that are going to stick around too. So I think his staff's going to be in a good spot for him as well.
Heath, to piggyback off your point, Coach Vann told us one thing that stuck in my mind, which was he doesn't want to be somewhere where the expectation is not to win. The expectation when he went to Sylvania, they expected to win out there whenever he got there. The expectation here at Scottsboro is to win. And, and I know he's probably had a few people in his ear whenever he left Sylvania that, might have said it might be a little harder to win here for various reasons. But I know enough about Coach Vann to know that all that does is motivate him.
Yeah, and he'll feast off of that, And the thing is that I've also heard people say, "Well, coaching 3A football is different than coaching 5A football," and I said, "Well, I don't think you really understand. Football is football. It's not that complicated of a game. You have a different style of players. You may have more players. You may have less players, no matter where you go. But football's the same. You coach it the same. It doesn't matter if you're at a 3A school or a 5A school. So you're going to adapt. He will adapt. He just may have more kids to choose from. You don't know how that's going to go. But Coach Vann, he's an outstanding coach. He's going to be, he's going to be successful no matter where he goes.
And Phil, I had a question for you. I know that you're probably tuned in more to Alabama high school football than just about anybody in the state. But this region that we're in, I think it is, if I'm a coach looking to move up into from 3A to 5A, it's not a terrible region to step into. Don't get me wrong. There's teams that are good. Gunnersville's good. Coach Osmond's done a great job at Arab. I mean, I don't think it may be done the best job in the state. But it's still not a terrible region to come into. It's a winnable region. I guess I'll just put it that way. I'm not saying that we expect, I expect us to go in and win it next year, but we have the opportunity to. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. Of course, Gunners was going to be Gunnersville every year.
Yeah.
Arab is just so well coached. He can take his 22 and beat somebody else's 22. He's just such a great coach. Now, one team that's up and coming that folks has got to watch out for is Sardis.
Yeah.
They are an up and coming football program. But yes, Scottsboro and Gunnersville both, I think, are a little bit head and shoulders above everybody else. But still, Boaz come on last year.
Yeah.
They struggled the early part of the year and played a pretty good game against Scottsboro, and then they ended in a flourish. So it's a competitive region, but yes, I think Scottsboro, when you're looking around, you're automatically going to pencil in Scottsboro or Gunnersville as probably being the two best teams. And of course, if you're Scottsboro, you want those expectations. You want them up there high. You want to be the one that has the bullseye on your back.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. To your point, I thought Boaz quarterback, I think his name is Tyler Pierce.
Yeah.
Threw one of the best balls I've seen all year. Last year, off his wrong side of his body, throwing sideways, just a incredible pass. They've done a good job, and Sardis has improved tremendously. But I think that the expectation that I think as far as the community goes for here next year. Not to put any extra pressure on him, but I don't think I'm putting any more pressure on him than what Coach Vann does to himself is, probably be hosting a playoff game, especially with who he's got coming back. Now, it's going to be difficult, to the offensive change that's going to have to happen. I mean, there's going to be a big difference. So how quickly can the kids adapt to Coach Vann's offensive system? How quickly can the backs and the quarterbacks get on the same page if they're doing RPO type stuff versus what we were doing last year, and can the offensive line gel, because that offensive front is so important. I mean, I think we saw it with the NFL playoffs last night and yesterday. The team with the best offensive line, defensive line tend to win the games. That's just what.
Appreciate you bringing that back up, Heath. Thank you for.
I'm sorry. Justin's a big Ravens fan, so he's been.
Thank you for that.
He's been torn up, but I think he's got the chance to probably host next year. Wouldn't you think, Justin?
Yeah, and guys, and Phil, I want to get your thoughts on this as a former play-by-play guy for Scottsboro, former announcer for us. I really want to get your thoughts, and Heath, your thoughts on maybe expectations for this next year. I've had several people ask me, what are the expectations going into Tyler Vann's first year as head coach? Well, I think it starts with your two biggest games, Fort Payne and North Jackson. I don't think it matters. Year over year, the expectation is to win those games every year. I mean, and it's been tough at times here, but Scottsboro is more than capable talent-wise of winning those games. I think that's where I'd start is, do you win those games, or how competitive are you if you don't win those games? And then from there, I don't really have a win-loss total in my mind as far as what I'd expect. What I really hope to see this year is just improvement week over week. That's really what if we get to the end of the year and we say, man, this team is drastically better than it was that first week against Fort Payne. I mean, I think that's what I'm looking for in this first season with Coach Vann, just progression every week.
Well, and I think this is kind of the history of what Coach Vann was when he's at Sylvania. His first year, they were very potent on offense, threw the football, and maybe they lacked a little bit on defense. on the defensive side of the ball because they were so potent on offense. Because a lot of times when you're real good on offense, the emphasis is not really there on defense. Well, his second year, they weren't as potent on offense, and they had to depend on the defense to let the offense kind of catch up. But by the end of the year, it worked well for them. And then you come into this year, and they were so good up front on the offensive side of the ball, they put a little less emphasis on throwing the football and wanted to play ball control and ran the ball. So it's going to be according to what personnel he has. And it sounds like you're still going to be a little bit run heavy. And then, like you were talking about developing the receivers, and I think as the year goes on, I think you'll see him kind of open up the offense and depend on his running game and defense to carry the load at the early part of the season. You don't want to beat yourself.
I want to add something here. Having watched the last 2 years of game film, I would say in the booth, you need to be prepared for game one's game plan to look completely different than game two. Like this year, famously at Locust Sport, Coach Vann completely scrapped the passing game, gave the ball to Aiden 41 time, put the two brothers in the backfield at tight end, and went power set. Now the next week, I think he threw the ball 20 something times. So I think you'll see a little more. The offense is flexible enough for a week to week game plan that may look different, widely different. But you know what? One thing about Coach Vann, he'll be honest up front and tell you what he's thinking.
We think we got that just from having lunch with him, didn't we, Justin?
We did that. That's one thing from a distance these last 4 years. He just kind of every week. If you haven't listened to us on Friday nights, every week we don't just talk about Scottsboro and who they're playing that week. We pick games from around our region that we think are interesting, and we pick the winners of them. We talk about key players and stats and all those things, and we try to give our listeners an idea of not just what's going on with the game in front of us, but what's going on around our area, because there's so much good high school football that's played in Northeast Alabama. But Heath has accused me over the years of having a little bit of a man crush on Tyler Vann, and I think it's because every week we get to Friday. And I just so happen to think that the Sylvania game that particular week, every week, was one of the more interesting games.
We seemed like we picked Sylvania every single week for the past 2 years. So I had to hold Justin back a little bit when we walked into the Mexican restaurant. I didn't want to run up and give Coach Vann a big hug right off the bat. I didn't think that would be appropriate. So he ended up not doing that, so we were good. But no, Justin does a good job picking all the games, but we try to have fun with it.
Heath, do you think the personnel's there that you can be a little more flexible and not? I mean, everybody thinks it's a spread offense, but I really think it's a multiple set according to or a multiple attack according to the opponent.
I think the personnel is here. Again, the receivers are going to be the biggest hole initially. And I'm not saying that they're not there. They just, with what Coach Bell did, they developed them differently, right? So I mean, they might have had 2 or 3 different route combinations, and then they had to be great blockers, and they were great blockers. Again, up front, which to me is the most important, there's a lot of good depth. I mean, there's a lot of people returning that will be able to help on the offensive side up front. Some really good offensive line play. You've got Jacoby Edmondson, who we mentioned at running back, who had a full season last year. At fullback, not a full season. He Fort Payne game, we had Keelan Alvarez that had a monster game, and then he got hurt early on in the North Jackson game, and he didn't come back until probably week 7, somewhere in that time frame. And Jacoby just stepped right in as a sophomore. He is a sophomore, right, Justin? I have to double check that. Maybe a junior, but 1,200 yards during that time frame, and played really, really well. You had Jaden Gilbert, who was one of our halfbacks. It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he scored a touchdown. I think he had like 20. He had under 20 carries and almost 7 or 8 touchdowns. He's got a lot of speed on the outside. Antonio Brox is another young man that played halfback for us that is good straight line speed, that if you can get him the ball going downhill quickly, he can beat you to the pylon. So I think he's got the ability to kind of mold this into what he wants. And then again, when you've got a quarterback, you go watch, and we talked a little bit about this the other night when we were eating. Coach Vann got to watch us play basketball. And of course, Jake plays basketball. A couple kids, Cooper Harding, one of our defensive ends, some others play football and basketball. And he said the one thing he liked about Jake was he could tell Jake wanted the ball when the game was on the line. He wanted to be the guy that made the play. And Jake's got that mentality, and we've seen him grow into that over the past few seasons. And so, I think that he has the opportunity to come in. And like I said, I mean, I would be really surprised right now, sitting here right now, if we didn't host a playoff game next year. And that's not no disrespect to Boaz or Sardis or Douglas or anybody else, Arab by any stretch. But they've got the personnel coming back. They've been coached well to begin with. They have the opportunity to get better. There's still room for growth there for all of them. And so offensively, I for sure think that there's a chance to be really good next year.
Heath, you talked about how Jake wants the ball, whenever the game's on the line or when the lights are the brightest. I mean, you were there with me his first start. I mean, he came in for our quarterback got injured. It was the first game against North Jackson and Coach Bell's first game at Scottsboro. And all Jake Jones did was score the game-winning touchdown with just a few seconds left in the game against our biggest rival.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of what he's had it since he's young. And people have watched Jake grow up around here. They know what type of competitor he is. And we've got a really solid backup, by the way, too. I mean, actually played as an 8th grader. And
Noah Tollison.
Yeah. So I'm excited. I don't want to get too excited and put too much pressure out there for anybody, and I'm not trying to do that by any stretch. But I think the community thinks that Coach Vann has the chance to come in and do good. And to your point, Phil, when you and Justin both said that who was on that short list, I don't know of anybody that I talked to that's paid attention to Northeast Alabama football or North Alabama football that did not have Coach Vann right there with the top candidates for this job and really thought it was kind of his to turn down. I don't know how it all happened, the inner workings, if there were other people that they talked to per se, but I know that a lot of people around here wanted to give him a shot and give him the opportunity to kind of grow over time. And especially being 28, like Phil said, it's an investment into him early, and is it somebody that we can keep for 20 years, can be the next Coach Morris. It turns into a legend here. And he may have that opportunity,
Hey, Phil, I think that you've got a good coach on your hands whenever your rivals aren't excited about the fact you hired him.
No. There's some great coaches in that region, and then they know what they're going to be competing against because he probably and may have the best offensive mind in the whole region. There's no bad, and to be able to adapt. And you guys was talking about, the receivers blocking and all. They'll have to do that in Coach Vann's offense because he's probably going to run the ball more often early than he will throw the football because he's going to take advantage. Because if his best player is Jones, he's going to ride that wagon. I mean, he's going to ride that train and use him because he'll kind of sort of build everything around him. Because he's a quarterback coach. He played quarterback. He knows the position, and he can take an average kid and make a good quarterback out of him. So I think the quarterback position is going to be key in his offense, but the running game is where it's going to be. I'm sure it is, but if he can get them to where they can throw the ball when they want to, that'll be a big plus. But I think Coach Vann's going to be up to the challenge, and I think Scottsboro's going to have a good year. I definitely think so because the foundation's laid, it's built. Those kids expect to win.
Let me just say one thing. We're going to talk a lot about Coach Vann and his success as a coach and the numbers and all the winning and all those things. But one thing that I admire about Coach Vann that maybe not everybody knows is the kind of person that he is off the field. He's a very religiously convicted person. I remember hearing the story about whenever he was an assistant at Buckhorn and Woodville. Actually, I think Jamie Darwin, if I'm not wrong, he was at Woodville whenever he hired Coach Vann in at Woodville in 2020. And Mr. Darwin offered that opportunity to Coach Vann, and Coach Vann turned it down initially. And he talked about how after he had turned that job opportunity down, that it really bothered him. Like he had kind of a feeling that maybe he hadn't made the right decision. And a couple of days later, Mr. Darwin called back and made sure he offered that job to him a second time before he gave it to someone else. And Coach Vance talked about how he felt like, God had given him an opportunity to make the right decision a second time. And he just feels like he's, he feels very comfortable where he is because he feels like he's where he needs to be. And I just think that whenever you're comfortable in your own skin, the way Coach Vann seems to be, I just think that translates over. I think that means positive things for you in a lot of different things in life. And obviously for Coach Vann, it's meant success in several areas, but especially on the football field.
Well, I'd like to add just a bit to that. Having done his show in the last couple of years, Coach Vann is my friend, and you don't say that about every football coach you run into. There's times that Coach Vann, as the individual of Tyler Vann, if I need a word of counseling or a word to pick me up, Coach Vann or Coach will come to me and tell me. So I do believe if you're looking for a quality human being, a new father, a beautiful wife, you could not paint a better image of who he is as a person than what he is. But now I will say his worst quality may be he will not lose at anything. You're Auburn fans. I'm a Tennessee fan. We done a pick'em contest this year. He absolutely refused to lose to me. So great, very
Yeah.
competitive.
Hey, and to tell you the way that is, I guarantee you, he's the type that comes to, if you're playing backyard football, if he gets mad enough, he's going to take his football and go home.
Heath,
So
I could have sworn his worst
and
quality was the fact
and
he was an Alabama
Heath,
fan.
hey Heath, just to show you another thing too, you've got another guy on here that's got a man crush on Coach Vann also.
Yeah, I've heard. Sounds like two of them. But
Yeah, wrong with man crush.
it probably it seems like it's all well deserved because from what I can tell, I haven't heard anything about him that I've been like, I don't know about that. Seems like everybody that I've talked to and from up on the mountain, they were all pretty happy with him. I know some people may not have been happy with how that season ended, but I mean, dadgum, they were right
19
there with
seconds.
19 seconds away from beating Madison Academy, finished second in the state. So,
Yeah.
and then Madison Academy, what did they move up because of competitive balance deal? So, that's a dang good football team that they were playing up here with probably, let's be honest, probably better athletes than
Oh
than
yeah,
what than what
definitely.
Sylvania had.
And I tell you another thing, the way Coach Vann is too is he looks for that little emotional edge. I mean, anything he can use for motivation. He's even called me one time. I don't know if y'all ever listened to the show, and the guy that calls that from Ohatchee that will say "Roll Tribe Roll" when Jeff
Yeah,
talks to him.
yeah.
Okay, Coach Vann wanted to know if we had a recording of that because he wanted to play that for the kids all week long before they played Ohatchee. So any emotional or competitive advantage he can get on somebody. So he told me he told me he used that in a little different way. Said one of the coaches said that all the time. That so he's going to use whatever it takes to motivate those kids. And yeah, and what y'all were talking about the way he is, if you play checkers with him and he's not winning, he's probably going to be the type that turns the table over.
See, that's why I don't play golf, Phil, is because I get too angry when I'm playing it and you can't be good at it immediately. So I don't have the
Yeah,
patience to wait. So I can't do it either. I hate losing. If I don't care if it's solitaire, I get mad about it. So I can understand where he's coming from, and that's what you want. That's
yeah,
what you need. You want that type of edge and somebody that'll push you. Because we talked about the other day, man. I can get on this soapbox, but I think I love high school football. I've always loved high school football. To me, it's the greatest sport on the planet. There's just certain lessons that you learn in football that I just don't think you can learn in anywhere else. There's some mental toughness, some fortitude, some push through some adversity, the competitiveness that comes from it, the camaraderie of, being injured and playing together and pushing through it. There's just some things that you can't get anywhere else. And when you got a coach that'll push you through those things, I remember a coach telling me one time, your body will go a lot further than your mind will tell you. And he's right. You think you're going to give up, you're ready to quit, but when you got somebody that'll motivate you like that and give you something, come up with an edge, whatever it is, then that stuff goes a long way, and it carries over later on in life too. It's something that'll stick with you the rest of your life.
And I hate to, I could go all night on this, but I know Heath has got responsibility with his family here in a few minutes. So I'd like to go around the table real fast and just get everybody, including you, Phil, your impression of the hire. Also, give a shout out to the living legend listening to us, coming to River-City-Media. We're going to have him on for a special show. Our friend Roger Allen listening, sending a shout out to all you guys.
Roger.
Oh, Rogers, I'm telling you, if there's a living legend in North Alabama, that might be it. Phil, what was your thought of the hire? And then everybody give their impression.
Well, I heard Coach Bell was going to resign probably about 2 weeks before it actually come public. Somebody gave me a little insider information, and we discussed immediately that day that they'd be crazy if they didn't hire Tyler Vann. So, I was kind of expecting this, because all the times that he's been at Sylvania for the 3 years, I've told everybody I know, because I know several from Sylvania. I said, some big school's going to come knocking. I said, you better enjoy your time with him, because some big school's going to come knocking. And if it's at the right place, right time, he's going to move forward, because, I think he is up for that challenge. And this is a great place for him to start, no doubt about it. He has the opportunity to really make a big name for himself at Scottsboro and, and the Northeast Alabama area.
Coach Vann kind of came on my radar back when he was hired at Woodville back in 2020. He was 24 years old at the time, and that's what stuck out to me. It's like, how does this guy land that kind of a job that young? Well, I mean, that's because Jamie Darwin saw something in him, and he was right. Coach Vann is, despite his age, not only is he wise beyond his years, he's a heck of a leader, and he's a leader of young men, and he's shown to be a very effective one. I'm a graduate of Scottsboro. I graduated Scottsboro in 2006. I mean, it doesn't. I'm not there. You'll be hard pressed to find anybody out there that's more Scottsboro than me. But whenever I'd heard that, that Coach Bell was resigning, Tyler Vann was number one on my list. And he's been in the back of my mind for years, because I've been hoping that if one of our rival schools, if one of their coaches moved on, that they didn't hire him. It's because of how much respect I've had for Coach Vann. And again, not just because of the success he's had on the field, because of the human being he is off the field as well. So, I hated to see Coach Bell go, and I wish him all the best going forward, wherever he lands. I'll be cheering for him wherever he is. But, if you've got to replace Coach Bell, Tyler Vann was the guy. And I'm so glad that Scottsboro brought him here.
Yeah, to your point, Phil, we'd kind of heard a little bit of the rumblings on Coach Bell resigning, and right off the bat had some people calling, asking what we should do, or just kind of getting my opinion on it. Not that I don't know that my opinion matters, but the first name that I mentioned was Tyler Vann, to multiple people, and I think Brad Dudley and the board did an outstanding job in their search and did their due diligence, but ultimately felt the same that we all felt. I think when Coach Dudley introduced him, it was somebody that he felt like could wear the black and gold, felt good about wearing the black and gold. And I think the community here, there's some people that still don't know a ton about him because he's so young, but the ones that do know about him are excited. When I talked to some of the players during the interview process, when they were trying to fill out who was all out there and kind of the names that were floating around, and I asked, well, who do you want? They said Coach Vann. And so the kids wanted him, the community wanted him, and we're happy to have him. And I think that it's going to be a good partnership for everybody.
Hey, I'm gonna tell you one thing too. If Coach Vann's listening, he owes us all lunch, because we have really buttered him up.
Really, I know. I'm gonna have to say something
lunch.
bad against him here. The first
I can't
broadcast or something.
Yeah, and Justin, what you were talking about, Jamie Darwin hiring him, I've known Jamie Darwin for a long time, and I guarantee you the reason he went back to Coach Vann and asked him a second time is Coach Darwin knows people. And I guarantee you the first time he told him no, he wasn't convinced. Or Coach Darwin would have moved on. So evidently he wasn't convinced, so he went back and gave him a second opportunity. And I think the world of Coach Darwin. He's at Pisgah now, and he's just a great people person. I've known him for a long time.
By the way, we had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting him. Heath and Shane covered Pisgah's playoff run this last season, and we had the pleasure of having him on our broadcast at halftime 2 different times. And you talk about somebody that not only, like you said, he's got an eye for good people and an eye for good coaches, because they've got a heck of a coach out at Pisgah right now, Luke Pruitt as well. But he's right where he needs to be. I think he's back home at Pisgah, and from what he told us, I mean, he is so happy to be back home at Pisgah.
Hey, funny story, guys, and I'll shut up. But Pisgah is the only place, I've told this a couple times, that they have chicken and dumplings in the concession stand. And we were calling one of those games, and it was cold. They were playing Tuscaloosa Academy, I believe, and had a bowl of those chicken and dumplings. Let me tell you, hit the spot. That's a lot better than a hot dog and some nachos.
Guys, he's been talking about these chicken and dumplings for months.
Hey, I had them. Hey, I went to Woodville and did 6 basketball games, and them chicken and dumplings I had at Woodville's hospitality room kept me going. So anytime
we need to. That's the only thing
you can serve. That's survival food.
Exactly. We're gonna have to. I've already brought it up to Coach Vann, but we're gonna have to get with the booster club, the band, whoever's dealing with the concession stand. If we get some chicken and dumplings in there, we can start making some money.
You know what? This is the first sports show to have chicken and dumplings on there twice in one broadcast. Don't know. Hey, Heath, Justin, come back and see us before the start of football season. I think we got a discussion to finish up about expectations and that expectations that's going to follow Coach Vann to Scottsboro. So
happy to do it, man. Well, excited to be able to opportunity. Appreciate it, man.
Well, guys, while y'all are here, I want to give you a shout out. I enjoy listening to your broadcast. I've been a Scottsboro fan for a long time. Even though I left from doing broadcasting, I still root for the Scottsboro Wildcats. It's a special place in my heart, but it's always a pleasure to listen to you guys on Friday night. Y'all give out a lot of information. Sometimes I even use it on our show. So y'all do an outstanding job, and sometimes I'll find myself when I'm thumbing through stations, I'll listen to y'all more. And I thought, wait a minute, I need to go back through here and, catch up on some other games. But y'all keep saying so interesting, and y'all do a great job of capturing the audience with information. And, and it's just a pleasure to listen to you.
Hey, Phil, I was a little bit starstruck. I think the first time that you I think you texted me after that Pisgah game, maybe the Tuscaloosa Academy game. And I remember on y'all's scoreboard show, I remember you mentioning my name on there, and I think I fanboyed out for a second and looked at Heath, and I was like, "Wait, did Phil Harris just say my name on the on that scoreboard show?" So it's I've been a fan of yours for a long time personally. It's really cool to, even though we've kind of developed a friendship off the air now, or off the platform now. It's cool to be sharing a platform with you and to talk to you, because like I said, I've heard your voice growing up on the radio my entire life. So it's cool to finally have that kind of relationship with you.
Well, and the big thing is that for me, it's so much about these kids, putting them on a pedestal, making them household names, because, they're going to finish school and they're going to be has-beens. And a lot of us are going to go into the world, really be nobodies. But it gives them an opportunity to have a platform to stand on, and gives their parents something to be proud of. And these kids, give them something to play for. I'm glad we don't live in Huntsville where these kids over there play in front of empty stadiums. It's not much fun.
Right.
Phil, what John said about you? You know what that means? You're old.
Yeah. Yeah. Howie calls me a legend all the time. I'm like, man, that just means I'm just an old man.
Yeah. Hey, for Randall Cunningham, thank you very much, Heath, Justin. Please come back sometime. We'll set this up again. Randall Cunningham, Phil Harris. Heath, how many more games you got tonight? Just one, I hope?
Got one. I'm one down, one to go.
All right. We're going to let Heath go. Justin's go. This will end up beyond the booth. Next week, we'll find somebody to come talk to us, but we will get these guys back on. We appreciate everybody. A lot of new faces on tonight. A lot of comments across there. The names I didn't necessarily know. I assume it's Scottsboro folk. And Roger Allen, going to get him on here to talk country music one night. For Phil Harris, Randall Cunningham, God bless. Be safe.